So part of today's conversation, as it relates to the first panel, so first and foremost, this is, I think, one of our more important conversations today, because I think it really kind of helps us frame how we approach the conversations going forward throughout the rest of the day. And as I mentioned before, if you think about Texas, and Texas as a laboratory, which is really, frankly, what a lot of my work is associated with, if you follow my things that I've written, the challenges that I think we face in Texas as it relates to health equity and the challenges of health equity, we can look at the Uvalde tragedy, which is almost, we're coming up on that year anniversary, as a microcosm for us to kind of unpack these challenges and issues that I think we all care about. And so today's conversation, as we talk about Uvalde and the challenges, is really not to unpack the tragedy itself, but sort of, in a sense, to think about how we can look to what's happening in the community in terms of resiliency, and forward-looking to unpack what are some best practices or lessons learned from the great work that y'all are doing on the ground. So we've got three great panelists, and their bios, by the way, are in your packet. And so I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm not going to read through bios because I want to save the time for the conversation. You can read their bios in the packet. The way the conversation will work is we've got about 45 minutes together. And I will moderate a conversation for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for y'all around the room here to ask questions as well of our esteemed panelists. So we've got three great panelists: Monica Martinez, UT history professor. You may have recently known Monica because she was named USA Today Woman of the Year. So congratulations! It's awesome to be with you. We've got UT social work professor and the director of the Institute of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, Noelle Bush-Armandez. Did I pronounce your last name for me? Armandez. Thank you. I knew I was going to butcher that as a kid from East Texas. It always happens to me. And then finally, we've got the Chief Operating Officer for Community Health Development in Uvalde, Amber Arthur. Thank you for making the journey up to Austin for us. So let's just start, and perhaps maybe, Amber, I'd kick this to you first, maybe the first question. And that is, can you tell us a little bit more about Uvalde, help us kind of understand and really kind of situate ourselves in the community where it is today?
Sure. So as we're very streamlined in the media, you can Google us and we'll have storylines for days. But where we're going is, I was telling Monica, Uvalde is a very rural area, but it's not as rural as the other counties that we serve. So Uvalde is an hour from San Antonio west and an hour from the border east. We sit in the middle. We do a lot of collaborations with our hospital. How can we service our community? Because there's always transportation issues. I love that y'all brought up social determinants of health, because we streamline that through OTech tablets. We try to get that data. But then we get to that point of, well, then what? We have all this data. We know what's wrong with our patients. Now what?
Yeah.
Now what do we do? Where do we go out? Where do we find these resources? So Community Health Development has linked up with a bunch of other nonprofit organizations in our community, and we made a team called Team Uvalde. In that organizations, we have domestic violence housings, we have SWART, which is Southwest Transportation Services, we have Methodist Health Ministries, it's just a group of a bunch of nonprofits that can help, but again, the services that they can render are so limited. So where we are now is trying to navigate, again, we've always known our needs. Now that we're so headline, we've been getting so many individuals that say, put us in, coach, where can we help you? And it's been so beneficial, but in the same token, hard, because we're having to get so creative in what we're being offered. We've been working with universities. We've never even thought about, hey, let's get students in our, the practicum students that need hours. Why don't we show them what a rural health center is, have them gain hours at your health center. A bunch of those creative points have been coming to us and has been changing it. We are part of TAC, which is the Texas Association of Community Health Centers, and we are leading the way to show them what is out there. Yeah. And I told Monica, and it took what happened for these resources to come to us. So what rural health center or health area is going to be next? Yeah. And so that is where we are.
Anything else to add to that conversation or thoughts?
I'll just put up the map. We did provide you with a map so you could see physically where Uvalde is situated. Just to point that Hondo is the closest mental health center to domestic violence center to Uvalde. So you can see how far people have to drive to seek domestic violence services too.
Right. And we've been fortunate. We do have a psychiatrist that's been on board with us for 6 years now. It was just for our patients at first, and then we opened it up to the community. And what we've noticed is people from Dallas, Houston, Austin, they're reaching out to our health center, and we're trying to figure out how is this happening? Well, she's credentialed through Blue Cross Blue Shield and one of the only psychiatrists, and doesn't have that much of a wait time as someone in San Antonio would. Yeah. And so then that threw in, we're like, okay, well, hold on. We're just trying to help our community. And we get people, EcoPass from Piedras is just a bridge over. So if you can just think, we service EcoPass, Del Rio, which is more on the Acuña side, and then all the little towns that surround it, which some populate 500, 1,000 people. And then... So how many counties do you say? About 10, and then others, we do open our doors because we do have that benefit of having a psychiatrist.
Can we unpack a little bit more about what are health conditions like in the community? Tell us a little bit more about both the challenges that maybe we face in terms of physical health care, but also mental health care. Maybe one of you can help us unpack that a bit.
You want to go ahead? So we did provide this map too, and I actually want Amber to help with this too, Yep. Just in terms of services. So we don't want to talk deep about the trauma, but I don't know if this has a pointer, but here's the Resiliency Center, which was stood up after May 24th, the shooting May 24th. This is the one all the way to the left here. So for people who needed services after the shooting at Robb Elementary. Here, because I don't know where the pointer is, this is Robb Elementary here, the library just north of it, and then just to the left here is the health center, right? Yes. And then all the way on this side is the hospital, and north there is the center for the new school. This area, this triangle area here, is the segregated Mexican area. So if you drew a circle around here, this would be the Mexican segregated community area here. And the other thing I'm going to get to your question. Cool. The other thing that's significant about Uvalde is this Highway 90 and this Highway 83, which maybe we'll get to a little bit later. So to your question is the services that are accessible to people became distant post-trauma, which is significant. Physically, geographically, they were distant. The community health center is situated right in the community, which was good, and the library, to Craig's article in their recent newsletter is situated and was a hub for people to seek services. They became instrumental in how people sought services, all sorts of services. Play therapy, so both traditional and non-traditional mental health services as people influx. But essentially, the needs assessment that we developed found that people influxed in great numbers, but they have started to leave. So before the tragedy, there was a great desert of services, mental health services in particular, and we're seeing people leave now. That is coupled with a misunderstanding about what mental health is. So having to really, really, really back up and talk with people about what mental health is. Why do you go to counseling, for example, is one of the big barriers that we face in Uvalde.
So a little bit about, and Monica, maybe you can help us think about this, is talk a little bit about how the dynamics of the community are organized from a social community structure. What does that look like on the ground, and maybe how has that evolved?
Yeah, thank you. So we have another slide. Could you point to the next circular slide? So in terms of understanding the strengths and the crisis points of the community, it's really what we've learned from the needs assessment is that the community, the agencies that are meeting the community needs understand how dynamic the community is. So on the one hand, this is a border community that follows patterns of neglect and lack of access to health that other border counties in the United States have. It is a predominantly Mexican-American community. Over 80% is Hispanic. There's also the dynamic of multi-generational families. So Amber could talk about the behavioral health programming that she's helped to develop, but also especially programming that's tailored to grandparents that are raising grandchildren. And this is a rural community, and so understanding the challenges of meeting health needs in a rural community and all of those challenges. But also this is a community that is also shaped by historical trauma and long patterns of mistrust that have grown from the history of this border community and the history of discrimination that exists. And it is also because of new immigration policies and the county signing on to Operation Lone Star, and in the aftermath of the tragedy, the inpouring of law enforcement. This is a heavily policed community. So in terms of thinking about the sort of boots on the ground that you need, the town is really overrun with law enforcement and is still has FTEs open for mental health professionals that are unfilled. So it is a resilient community. One of the real strengths is the historical cooperation between agencies, really led by CHDI and Team Uvalde, this group of incredible, almost exclusively women that come together to meet community needs. There's an abundance of natural resources. There's tourism that comes to the town for things like hunting, but also to enjoy the rivers. And this is a bilingual, binational, and bicultural community. And so what we have found from our needs assessment is that some of the agencies that come to the town to provide services that are struggling to meet the community need is because they don't have that cultural awareness that is required to build trust and to design strategies that will encourage people to come to you. And really as a foundation, and this is the model that CHDI provides, is you can't expect people to come to you, you have to go to them and help contribute to public education, contribute to education about just basic well-being. And so I'd love Amber to talk more about that. Could I share one more slide?
Of course.
We put together some icons. In terms of the challenges in Uvalde, there's the poverty. I hope that Amber could talk more about the limited infrastructure and the challenges of limited broadband access. I have been in the town when the one internet provider goes down, the entire town shuts down. You can't buy gas, you can't go to H-E-B, the schools are limited unless you have cash. The history of limited access to healthcare, limited mental health access, and stigma. The stigma around mental health is profound. low tech literacy, which means that it's when there are tech solutions, they're challenging for people to navigate. Limited employment opportunities, which is something that I think in terms of the well-being economy, there's so much growth for thinking about employment opportunities and inspiring communities by creating new dynamic opportunities. The underfunded education is dire in Uvalde. The historical institutional betrayal is impacting agencies' abilities to develop trusting relationships. This is a historically under-resourced town. And so the infrastructure that you need to actually put some of these dollars to work isn't there, which makes all of this challenging. And Amber can talk about their strategies for meeting these solutions. And then there is the misallocation of resources. One of the things that we learned, for example, is that half of the city budget goes to law enforcement. And so that also means that law enforcement has a crucial role in meeting some of the mental health services. So if there's somebody in crisis that needs a bed at a mental health hospital and they need transportation to San Antonio, they're in the back of a police car. And that we can, there's falls way outside of best practices.
Yep.
And then, of course, there's gender inequality. But Amber and CHDI have been meeting the community needs, have been advocating for more resources for decades, and they really have the expertise to lead the way to the future.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Where do you want me to start?
Well, I think the question, I'd love to talk a little bit more. I think this infrastructure piece is really important, right? So we can devise all the strategy and all of the and potential around the services, but if we don't have the infrastructure base in place to deliver on these services, that obviously creates a significant challenge for the community. You guys are working or thinking about that. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, when it comes to administration office nowadays, COVID world really showed us the hybrid. So we could put anyone anywhere. But when we talk about infrastructure, you could offer so much space, but if it's not in the right spot, it's not going to work. So the way we've done it is we've made pods. And in that medical pod, it's your 2 mid-levels or MD with their nursing staff, but not only their nursing staff and the PSS individual, it's care coordinators, it's community health workers, and prior to May 24th, we had a licensed professional counselor roaming the halls as part of the care team. So that it would be, hey, diabetic, that's not very healthy and we cannot figure it out, meet someone from my care team. They didn't know, but it was a licensed professional counselor. And so we had to get creative. And in doing that, it's how do we break down walls and get these rooms like flutes available for it to work. We have a fitness center where trying to get people to work out is just terrible. Even at $20 a month, we can't get them in. So then now changing that fitness center into offices because we need more people on hand to do the back work. And then on top, it's the real estate when we're recruiting so hard and then we can't find a home for them. There is an article, our front newspaper, where the school district bought about 5 homes just so they can start recruiting for high quality counselors into the school district and, looking outside of the box, because if we don't have that home, it's a big piece of recruitment. So we've been working in different angles, in different directions, and trying to do what we can with what is available.
So Noel and Monica, one of the things that jumped out at me when we had our prep call for this discussion, as it related to challenges, obviously infrastructure is a challenge, the idea of distance for resources. But as resources are coming into the community, one of the things that you all pointed to was the capacity of the community to absorb these resources. Can one of y'all talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's an important point for us to think about as we unpack these issues.
I think it's a layered question. We put trauma shock at the bottom. In part, we need to recognize that communities that have experienced a tragedy like this are including the leaders, are experiencing trauma. And so being able to negotiate leadership when everybody, a community of 15,000, the degree of separation is minute from that tragedy. So part of the role of IDVSA and my team is to do trauma-informed research. And so recognizing that as one piece of your question is important. So building capacity for leaders to understand when they're seeing trauma and how to move forward to that. And then building the infrastructure, so thinking both immediate and medium term and long term in terms of building that infrastructure. As Amber just said, I think is really important. So we just met with the Chamber of Commerce, for example. There's an amazing capacity for this 4-team chamber to take on and willingness and capacity and competency and capability. So finding those places where rural communities can and building from there. So we're going to hopefully be partnering with IC Squared to do some work with them to build. I think that's one of the areas that's immediate. And then long-term and medium-term, we've worked with the health center to partner with Our Lady of the Lake, for example, to recruit social workers. So it's a longer-term solution, but how do you recruit social workers to want to come home to Uvalde or recruit them through incentivizing working in Uvalde through internships, and then longer term, maybe paying them like we did with Title 4E funds through child welfare, a similar program. So I think it's all of that, really trying to incentivize from multiple places to build that infrastructure.
Anything else to add?
Oh, so much. We don't have enough time. But, we really are thinking about the need for, and we have identified, and we hear this from officials, we hear this from community members, the need for public health education. And that part of building capacity is educating everybody in Uvalde about trauma, educating everybody in Uvalde about mental health, to think about really just teaching people, so that the baseball coach, so that the custodians at school, so that the one of the community members that we work with works for AT&T. And so some of the people that we've helped connect to resources, mental health counseling, is people that he's referred to us because in their homes, when he's troubleshooting the Wi-Fi and the internet, he meets a mom who has a kid that was at Rob and is struggling. And so we've thought about learning from health communications expertise to really design a strategy that is specific to Uvalde, but thinks about rural community needs and then could be built and used elsewhere. We also hear from community members and officials about the need for a playbook, that the playbooks for the aftermath of a school shooting did not work in Uvalde. There were just a number of, in our needs assessment, our preliminary findings, we have a second phase this summer planned. There were just so many points of failure. And the officials know it, and the community leaders, the mental health professionals, the health professionals know that the strategies that were brought in were not going to work for a whole set of reasons. And so, but there is so much energy in the town to raise awareness, to say this is going to happen in other communities, it is happening in other communities, and the strategies, the response strategies have to meet the community's specific needs.
Can I just add?
Yeah, please.
Excuse me, one more piece that we think we're going to engage community members in an advisory group. So we've started to work with the leadership, so the mayor, the city manager, county commissioners, on the idea that part of the funding that we will raise will stand up a community leadership to work side by side. So in that way, the community will be engaged in decisions going forward, because one of the failures post May 24th was the community was not engaged in so many decisions. And it was also very white. the decisions were very white, with a community of 86% Mexican American. It just did not work. It excluded so much of that, and so standing up a body of leaders that are engaged will build capacity in a completely different way. It will shift power, we hope. So that's part of when foundations are starting to talk with us. We want to offer that as a capacity building mechanism. And we are talking with leaders right now about doing that. So we feel like we're the mediators.
Yeah, it would seem to me that the community engagement piece is such an important piece to the resiliency for the future, right? It's that all of the challenges that you've all addressed are the structural and infrastructure and services challenges, but that community buy-in and engagement piece is really, quite frankly, probably the foundation for a lot of this work in terms of being able to make sure it really gets to the folks who are trying to that are trying to access the services. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how your organization is kind of serving that role as an ambassador, perhaps?
Sure. And I know Monica wanted me to touch on broadband. And, she mentioned about the cell tower. And so we've been creative in ways where you want to offer that telehealth because that's all we can get sometimes. And, well, they don't have a smartphone, one. And then two, if they do, the service is just spotty. So the whole session is worried about you glitching instead of what really needs to be going on. So what we've done is we have virtual rooms for the patient to come in, like if they're coming into a medical visit and they go into this virtual room, it's a computer with a camera, and on the other side, it's a counselor. So that's one experience. One thing that we've done, we offer free Wi-Fi to all our patients because even for remote patient monitoring, we have to use Wi-Fi to show them how to work it, orientate them, and even at that, it's like pulling teeth. So we just we had to get creative with an FTE. She mentioned we don't have a full-time counselor. We do fortunately have a psychiatrist, but she's serving all of our providers medication management, and it's at 30 minutes. So she's seeing at a minimum 15 patients of all ages. So thankfully, Texas Children's Hospital stepped up, and they've been providing us some child psychiatrists. But again, they can only come once a month in person, and parents, oh, this is my kid, I want to see who they're seeing. Virtual is not really ideal until they meet them, and then we open up that to them. We've also been working, as she mentioned, with Our Lady of the Lake, St. Mary's, Texas A&M. We've been working with other Sol Ross University, and when they're in their master's program, they need the practicum hours. So saying, can we have them do some hours? And we found one, I want to say it was St. Mary's University. It ended up being a native of Uvalde. So it was just like, oh, our dots are lining up finally. And hopefully we can get that one LPC because I have 6 counselors that make up one FTE.
Wow.
And they come every Monday, it's one provider. Every Tuesday, it's one provider. Every Wednesday, it's another. And we're just recruiting from all these agencies.
So before we turn it over to the audience, I guess one of the things I'd ask for about from the research standpoint, and maybe Noelle and Monica, you can offer us some feedback here, is that as you guys are thinking and looking at Uvalde and working with the community there, what lessons, obviously we've unpacked a lot of lessons in the discussion here, but what lessons stand out to you as things that as we as a conference, as we talk about the well-being economy, should put front and center as we're trying to unpack lessons learned for the work that we're looking to do in the future here?
Oh, goodness.
Well, it's a big question.
It's a big question, but I think, so much of what the relationships that we've been able to build and the trust that we've been able to build has grown from our methods. That the needs assessment that we're running in the town is community informed. And we came to running a community needs assessment in conversation, in dialogue with community members and community officials. And so we've been back to Uvalde 9 times, but the first trip to Uvalde for a set of days in October, we met with 17 different people, community members and city and county officials, to ask, what is it that you need? How can we help? And to say, let's put our research skills to work for this community. You know, what starts in Texas changes the world. It needs to help in rural Texas. It needs to help transform rural Texas too. And so, so that community-informed practice has also meant that we've had to learn from the expertise of people like Amber and Mayla Castañón, the CEO, to think about, you know, there was a mental health needs assessment that was run by the Meadows Institute has some stellar recommendations, but it only was measuring mental health. And when you talk to people like Mayela Castañón and Amber, they're like, to understand the public health needs, you have to understand the challenges of, there's no public transportation in the town. You have to learn about the dynamics in the community, the social determinants, to understand the needs and then to be able to build strategies that work. So our community-informed needs assessment has required us to build relationships, to build trust, and then to actually be able to think, to identify the whole set of needs that have to be met to offer real working solutions.
So that framework's really important to establishing the foundation for that playbook that you were mentioning earlier as we're sort of thinking that through. Noel, anything to add?
I would just say when we've met, so our authenticity, the ability to be genuine, and you know, we often say is like, hold this complexity. People want us to hold all of it. So being multidisciplinary helps, being able to follow up helps. I mean, this sounds so like, yeah, right. But really being able to do that, we're all working pro bono. We are working on shoestring budgets, very, very small internal funding. But we show up every single month, multiple times a month, and we do what's asked. We have not said no yet. So we have a number of deliverables, and then negotiating, because we're working in trauma spaces, we're negotiating sort of just moving towards that trauma. And that's a really hard space to move towards, because sort of a mistake around understanding the historical trauma that exists in Uvalde and the current trauma could be devastating to our, it could exacerbate the eroding trust that's happening. And then the ability to support that community in the future. So there's things that are very parallel to other rural communities, I believe, in Texas, and things that may be unique.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Questions from the audience? Yes. We do somewhere. It's right here.
Multiple mics up here.
We got one right here. We had an extra mic there, and I'm sorry. I've been passing it around. I'm a terrible.
First of all, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your story. It's very moving, and you know, a lot to unpack here. So I spent 10 years in El Paso before I came here, and El Paso is a similar border community, but it's much bigger than Uvalde, and it's urban and urban-rural. And we also had a catastrophic event in August 2019 with a shooting in a Walmart. So just some reflections on some of the things that you said. I think that as we're thinking about a well-being economy and the lessons we've learned in our communities that are very underserved, the key thing in that is relationships and building trust before there's a need. right? So El Paso is very similar to the community you described in terms of just the capacity and organization of the community organizations and nonprofits that are in that area, and how amazingly creative and resourceful they are with very little. And there was a new medical school there, and there was recognition and understanding that that community engagement was going to be very, very important. So we were lucky in that we had done a lot of this work already with trust building, working with communities, and creating these kinds of ecosystems, an alternative ecosystem, if you like. So I would say, as we're thinking about the well-being economy, what we really need to do, and this is what you finished with at the end, is the community engagement piece. It has to be there at all levels, all organizations, medical schools, city government, public health, so that when these needs arise, you're not building trust and you're not having to do that before you can provide the services and help the community that you need. That lived experience that you're trying to really intervene upon is already understood and heard. So I think that as we're thinking about this third phase of economic development, to me, that is the critical piece.
Yeah, it's a great lesson. Thank you for sharing. Anyone want to react to that?
I'd love if Amber would tell us a little bit about their well-being festival that they had in the winter. We went, and I was moved to tears with joy. I felt like I was going to a quinceañera. The team members were like, "Uh-oh, Monica's dancing." I was like, "I can't stop. There's a DJ." I mean, it's approximately 50,000 people in the town. They served 2,000 families in one day with this winter festival fair. So I'd love to just what works to get people in Uvalde to a health fair.
It's tough. It's word of mouth and social media for some. And then, of course, just putting flyers all over. But it was such a great event, and we always try to make it stay in what we do. It's a health event. We're going to have fun, and we're going to give you goodies, but staying in that dynamic that, yes, it is a health event. We have blood pressure machines. We had insurances that wanted to just give out some information. We had the Texas Food Bank was amazing. They served, I want to say 2,000 hams for Christmas. Yeah, so families were able to take that ham and veggies home so they could, have a feast. And it does take a lot, but making sure we stay on that key term, that why we're here, your health, and giving them that good information. And so we actually made a bingo card, and it's like you have to go to every single station before you get your ham. Don't skip out on any of them. And we do plan on doing more. We're going to have a Christmas in July coming up that we're going to, again, get our information out there. We're working with the Mind, Body, and Medicine, Dr. Jim Gordon, on how we can just get that out there to all our community. And just, we've done it for years. We normally do it in August for Community Health Center Week. So it's always been something that we do. It's just now we're getting it bigger and making it more. The more we show them and the public health and all the services, our main thing is to have those vendors there, because many don't even know about it. Yeah. And so
that placemaking piece is a great opportunity for us as we build community. Other questions? We'll go to the back.
Yeah. So, okay.
We'll go there, and then the gentleman in the back as well.
Sure. So I work for a health system, and what we do in the area that I work in is Houston, and they have school-based health clinics. Mm-hmm. So my question is, do you think if we were to have more school-based health clinics, would that be something that would be beneficial? And if you do, then I would ask you to support Senate Bill 1966 by Alvarado, right? Because to me, it's like going back to what the person was talking about earlier, is like meeting people where they're at, right? And being there and having that opportunity to know your community, right? And how then do we support that, right? And it's important. We have this surplus, right, in the state of Texas, and how do we then support that and ask the people that represent us to do those things. And so my question then to you is, do you think that would be beneficial to have those school-based health clinics or not?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. We were actually in the works before May of getting it because a grant is due. I want to say the 1st of May, actually. Our grant writer has been working with it. And then May happened, and then it just prolonged us. So we were working in that, and we're still working with that. It's been tough with superintendents changing and everything, but that has always been our goal. Not only because the private practice, their accessible of care is not there sometimes because they're busy. If someone calls, they kind of triage them and say, okay, well, we can get you in tomorrow or the next day. Well, that's 3 days of my child missing school because they can't come back with until they have a visit note. And I love that you brought it up because I made an example to the superintendent on Tuesday when I met with him. My daughter got sent home for pink eye, and I know my 5-year-old. It's not pink eye. She has terrible allergies, normally is on Singular, and we ran out. But I had to pull her, take her to the health center, deem it not being pink eye. By that time, my meetings started piling up, so she just lost a whole day of school that could have been prevented from a school-based clinic. So absolutely, very beneficial. It's there. It keeps them there. And then not only the school-based clinics that I've worked with in Crystal City, that was where I was at prior, they have one, and it was just for pediatric, like just for medical, but to expand the services. Whoever you have in that school-based clinic is going to be key because they have to pick up on those cues from that child. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it will move mountains. And, our superintendent mentioned they're having trouble finding counselors for each school, which is great, but you have one counselor servicing 600 kids? No way. So, absolutely, thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, everybody call your legislator.
Thank you. Question in the back, yes.
Thank you. God love you with all the problems you have, and they send you more police. That seems like a gas can for a fire. But in light of that, has law enforcement actually learned something about sensitivity, and is there something they're learning with the challenges in your community that you think they could take those lessons to other law enforcement agencies in other counties where obviously the challenges between multiracial communities and police has been a problem? Is there anything positive happening? If not, then there's no follow-up question.
I can't really speak on behalf of that, but I will say it was terrifying first day of school, and there's lights there. So every pickup and drop off, every school has multiple DPS. But for my daughter's school, I can speak on that, is she knows them. It's a high five into the building and see you later, see you tomorrow. So, but as far as what they're feeling and if they can incentivize with us, I can't speak on that.
And then the other question is, given all the challenges, there's so many infrastructure, systemic challenges that you have. I sit on the board of the National Coalition for Safe Schools, and it feels like it's a very hard, we've got a new problem all the time. What do you need? We appreciate you sharing, but what can we give you that you think would actually move the needle? Because the systemic stuff is going to take a long time, and legislative changes are great, but is there anything we can do for you?
Get the information from the needs assessment. There's a lot. Everyone has needs, but the information from the community needs assessment is going to be crucial. You all are the experts. You've worked with it. We're just one community of 15,000. There's many others. So I'm interested for you all to just get it from not only Uvalde, but the other rural areas and really compile that information because you will see a trend.
Thank you.
Could I speak to the law enforcement aspect? The Meadows Institute mental health needs assessment found that there's a dire need for training for law enforcement that still continues, and also for educators. So what we have found is that the training that teachers were eligible, they were encouraged to attend training. It was not mandatory for how to meet the needs of students that have experienced this kind of trauma. it was scheduled 2 weeks after the massacre. And so the teachers themselves were experiencing shock. And so from the teachers who did participate, it's unclear how much they have actually been able to implement into their own practices. So you have a community, and when we try to talk about the degree of separation here, not only were there hundreds of students and employees at Robb, but hundreds of first responders. And so if people don't know a student who was impacted or an employee, they know a first responder or a law enforcement officer. And so when we think about the needs of the community and being able to meet all of those needs, what you're raising is for people that are the law enforcement that are coming in, cycling in, weeks at a time or months at a time. That's a really interesting question to see what they're taking back. But what we learned from that Meadows Institute needs assessment is that the kinds of education that needs to happen for law enforcement is dire.
Well, the reason for that question is the opportunity in figuring out how do you get people who don't live in your town, which is small, to care, and how do you get money to come into the town? And if there can be a research project on, let's put some time and money into the interaction between the community, the healthcare, what few people you have in healthcare there, and law enforcement to say, what can we learn about challenges in a community that has multicultural challenges and language challenges, that if they study that because it's top of mind, especially with the anniversary coming up, then the idea is they want to take that back to other communities, because you're not the only community that's having challenges with a diverse population, right? Or maybe not diverse, just you've got challenges there. So could we make that a reason why people put a lot of time and money in to study it so they can then apply it somewhere else?
And that is a part of the needs assessment. The second phase of the needs assessment is one of the questions that we have is, what is the impact of this militarization of this community, especially around immigration? So we do know that Robb Elementary last academic year was under lockdown 55 times. So if you think about the number of school weeks, that's more than once a week. And so that one of the findings is that contributed to the school not responding to the emergency because they didn't know it was an actual emergency. And also that students that have experienced trauma from the massacre continue to be impacted by lockdowns that happen regularly in the town because of bailouts. And so the immigration policing strategy that is being used, one of the things that we're trying to document is how it is impacting the ability of the community to heal, the ability of students to heal. And we have heard from teachers about students who, after these lockdowns, stay home for days before they're able to return. And so the trauma shock that underlines the community is being impacted by immigration policies, policing practices, and our real inability to be creative about what school safety means and to ask kids what makes them feel safe.
Noah, you wanted to?
I just wanted to add to that. I think what's needed, and this isn't just in Uvalde, is the permission to talk. People are fearful. I think that's including law enforcement, because now they're being sued, so they can't talk. They're being ordered not to talk. But teachers, not only in Uvalde, are fearful about talking. And so if you have any leverage to open up conversations about what's happening for teachers in school, they're fearful about this being their last day, it being their classroom. And so we need to start the dialogue about the fear of your career being a war zone. And there are ways to do that. There are lots of models to do that. And there are ways to help teachers talk with students about that that are long-standing. So it's training and it's the ability to process with your coworkers about what's happening. So that's what I would encourage you to explore in your position.
Cool. Y'all, we are at time. I'm sorry, but please join me in thanking Amber, Monica, and Noel. Thank you.